Welcome to Boring Stuff, the channel that makes the most fascinating topics calm enough to help you drift off to sleep. In this video, we'll journey through Earth's entire 4.5 billion year history, from a swirling cloud of cosmic dust to the birth of oceans, the rise and fall of dinosaurs, frozen ice ages, and the moment humans first walked the land. By the end, you'll see how our ever-changing planet survived collisions, fire, ice, and mass extinctions to become the home we know today. Let's start at the very beginning, a time so distant it feels more like a dream than history. Imagine the vast emptiness of space 4.5 billion years ago. There was no Earth, no oceans, no trees or animals to rustle in the wind. There was only darkness punctuated by the faint glow of young stars and drifting clouds of gas and dust, floating like cosmic smoke across the endless void. Somewhere within this cloud, a remarkable process was set in motion. Long before the sun settled into its steady shine, a swirling disk of gas and dust formed around its early blaze. This was the solar nebula, the leftover material from ancient stars that had exploded as supernovae, scattering heavy elements like iron, silicon, carbon, and oxygen into the galaxy. Every bit of rock, every drop of water, every living cell that would one day form on Earth was born from this cosmic debris. Tiny grains of dust began to stick together. It's a simple idea, but a powerful one. Small particles colliding, clinging through static electricity, growing larger and heavier. Over countless thousands of years, these grains became pebbles, pebbles became rocks, rocks grew into boulders, and eventually into planetesimals, early building blocks of planets, some as large as mountains or small continents. Gravity did its work patiently and relentlessly. Larger planetesimals pulled in smaller ones, sweeping through their orbits like cosmic vacuums. With each collision, heat was released, melting and welding rock together. The sun's young solar winds gradually blew away much of the leftover gas, but the solid material kept gathering, drawn inward by gravity's invisible hand. In this busy region of the disk, a growing mass began to take shape, our early Earth. It was not the calm blue marble we see today. Instead, picture a chaotic, molten sphere under constant bombardment from other rocky bodies. Asteroids and comets rained down, some the size of mountains, others the size of small planets. Each impact unleashed unimaginable energy, melting surface rock and vaporizing parts of the crust. This constant turmoil made early Earth a world of fire and fury. Its interior churned with liquid rock and heavy metals. Over time, the heaviest elements, like iron and nickel, sank deep toward the center, forming a dense core. Lighter silicates floated toward the surface, slowly cooling into what would one day become the crust. Deep inside, the spinning molten metal core generated a magnetic field, a protective shield that would later help safeguard Earth's atmosphere from the relentless solar wind. Earth's early story was not just about steady growth, but also dramatic violence. One of the greatest impacts in our planet's history happened when a Mars-sized body, named Theia by scientists, collided with the young Earth. The energy released in that moment defies the imagination. Rock vaporized, molten material shot into orbit, and a ring of debris circled the battered planet. This debris eventually gathered under its own gravity, forming the Moon, our constant companion in the sky. When it first formed, the Moon orbited much closer to Earth than it does today, appearing huge in the night sky, glowing red-hot from the energy of its birth. The moon did more than decorate the heavens. Its gravity stabilized Earth's axis, helping to moderate the planet's tilt and create a rhythm of seasons that would one day nurture forests, grasslands, and countless forms of life. Even this violent collision set the stage for a more stable, life-friendly world. Amidst all this chaos, Earth's surface slowly began to cool. Molten rock solidified into the first crust, though it was constantly cracked and recycled by impacts and volcanoes. Volcanoes vented gases from deep within the planet: carbon dioxide, water vapor, ammonia, forming a thick, toxic atmosphere. The air was unbreathable by any modern standard, but it was a start. Water vapor condensed as the surface cooled further, falling as rain onto the hot, bare rock. This rain likely evaporated on contact at first, but over millions of years it gathered in low places, filling basins and forming the first ancient oceans. In tiny pockets of mineral crystals called zircons, scientists have found hints that Earth may have had liquid water surprisingly early, perhaps only a few 100 million years after its formation. These first oceans, swirling under a poisonous sky, were the cradle for the next great leap in the planet's story: the emergence of life. The sun above was still young and tempestuous, flaring and blasting solar radiation into space. But Earth's growing magnetic field deflected much of this onslaught, while the thickening atmosphere helped keep the surface from freezing in the cold of space. Slowly, the constant battering by giant impacts eased. Fewer large asteroids remained to strike. The battered crust grew stronger, giving land masses a chance to survive. There were no continents yet as we know them. Instead, volcanic islands and early crustal fragments jostled on a restless sea of molten rock beneath. These small land masses would one day merge, drift apart, and merge again, beginning the long, patient cycle of plate tectonics that still shapes mountains and oceans today. While the surface transformed, deep chemical reactions were setting the groundwork for the first living things. Simple molecules, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, were present in the oceans and the atmosphere, thanks to both Earth's volcanic breath and the icy comets that bombarded the surface. Lightning, ultraviolet radiation, and the warmth of volcanic vents provided the spark for chemical bonds to break and recombine in countless ways. Over immense spans of time, these reactions would produce more complex compounds, until, somewhere in Earth's dark oceans or warm, shallow pools, the first simple cells flickered into existence. In these earliest days, there were no eyes to witness the churning seas or the steaming rain. There were no voices to speak of what was coming. But every grain of dust that clumped together, every fiery impact that reshaped the planet, every drop of rain that fell on glowing rock, all of it pushed Earth forward. What began as scattered stardust was becoming a world capable of supporting life. Today, when we look up at the moon, we see the lasting mark of that ancient collision. When we stand on solid ground, we stand on minerals forged in the fires of a molten past. The air we breathe, the water we drink, all of it is tied to these early, violent moments. From chaos came stability. From fire came oceans. From a cloud of dust came a living planet. This was Earth's birth. A story not of peace and quiet, but of energy, movement, and transformation on a cosmic scale. It is the first page in a history that would unfold through frozen ages and fiery cataclysms, mass extinctions, and extraordinary bursts of life. Each era would build upon the last, layer by layer, forging the Earth we know today. And so, the journey began. After the collisions and chaos that shaped Earth's birth, our young planet entered an age defined by heat, fire, and relentless transformation. This was a world where the surface was an ocean, but not of water. Instead, it was a vast, rolling sea of molten rock. The early Earth glowed like a forge in the dark expanse of space, its heat radiating outward as it struggled to cool from the incredible energy locked inside. Imagine standing at the edge of this world, if one could even stand at all. There were no solid continents to find footing, no calm breezes or gentle rains. Everywhere, rivers of lava stretched to the horizon, bubbling and steaming as gases escaped in furious hisses. Volcanoes, taller than any we know today, erupted constantly, spilling more molten rock onto an already churning surface. It was a planet alive with fire. This state, a global magma ocean, was born from the sheer violence of Earth's formation. Each massive impact during the planet's accretion released enormous amounts of energy. Some of the largest collisions vaporized rock entirely, sending it high into the atmosphere where it cooled, only to rain back down as molten droplets. Each cycle added more heat to the planet's growing interior. The giant impact with Theia that gave us the Moon was the final blow that kept Earth in this molten state for millions of years. While this seems like endless destruction, these fiery beginnings were actually building the foundations of the world we know. Deep inside this magma ocean, elements began to separate in a process called differentiation. Heavier elements like iron and nickel sank inward, gathering at the core under immense gravitational pressure. This created Earth's dense metallic heart, a spinning dynamo that would later generate the planet's protective magnetic field. Above this growing core, lighter silicate minerals rose toward the surface. Over time, these minerals cooled and hardened to form the early crust, although in these days it was fragile and constantly recycled by impacts and volcanic flows. The crust would crack, melt, and reform again and again, a dynamic cycle that slowly thickened Earth's outer shell. Even today, echoes of this process remain. Every tectonic plate, every volcanic eruption, every earthquake is a continuation of the restless energy that first stirred inside the magma ocean. But Earth's transformation was not limited to rock alone. Deep within its interior, radioactive elements like uranium, thorium, and potassium generated heat through decay. This slow, steady release of energy kept the mantle hot and mobile, powering the convection currents that would drive plate tectonics for billions of years to come. Without this internal furnace, our planet might have cooled and hardened entirely, losing the dynamism that makes it so unique among its neighbors. While the surface boiled, Earth's atmosphere began to take shape. In these early days, the atmosphere was nothing like the life-giving air we know now. Volcanoes spewed out vast amounts of gas, carbon dioxide, water vapor, sulfur dioxide, ammonia, and methane. These gases blanketed the planet in a thick, choking haze. Toxic by today's standards, this atmosphere trapped heat, keeping Earth's surface molten for longer than it would have been otherwise. But these same gases were the seeds of future oceans, clouds, and eventually the delicate balance that would sustain life. One of the most significant transformations during this fiery period was the creation of Earth's early hydrosphere. As the surface slowly cooled between impacts, water vapor in the atmosphere began to condense. At first, rain fell in brief, scalding storms that instantly vaporized upon touching the hot crust. But over thousands of years, as the surface temperature dropped further, the rain persisted. Steam turned to liquid, collecting in low-lying areas. Pools formed, then lakes, then the earliest versions of Earth's oceans. It is humbling to imagine that the water in our rivers, clouds, and even our own bodies may trace its origins to these first rains, or perhaps to icy comets and asteroids that continued to deliver water as they crashed into the cooling Earth. Despite the rain, the balance between molten rock and solid ground remained delicate. Immense volcanic provinces called large igneous provinces erupted, flooding huge regions with fresh lava. These events reshaped the landscape in days, adding new layers of basalt and driving gas into the atmosphere. Each outpouring affected the climate and chemistry of the air and sea, even before complex life existed to adapt or perish. Below the thin crust, the mantle seethed with convection. Heat from the core pushed rock upward in plumes, while cooler material sank back down. A slow, swirling motion that continues to this day. This movement would eventually break the crust into plates, setting in motion the cycle of continental drift, mountain building, and deep-sea trench formation. But for now, the surface remained a patchwork of unstable rock, more ocean of lava than land. It is remarkable that amid this intense heat and turmoil, the seeds of stability were being planted. Earth's magnetic field, generated by the spinning, convecting iron core, began to strengthen. This invisible shield deflected charged particles from the young sun, preventing the solar wind from stripping away the atmosphere entirely. Without this protection, Earth might have ended up like Mars, cold, dry, and barren. But the magnetic field allowed the atmosphere to thicken, the surface to cool, and water to persist. Scientists know of this fiery age through clues hidden in the oldest surviving rocks and minerals. Tiny zircon crystals, some more than 4 billion years old, bear isotopic signatures that reveal when they formed. These crystals show that patches of solid crust emerged surprisingly early, despite the relentless bombardment and volcanism. Each ancient mineral is a window into a time when Earth was still deciding what kind of world it would be. Even the Moon holds a record of these events. Its cratered surface is a fossilized map of the impacts that once battered both worlds. Without plate tectonics or weather to erase them, the Moon's scars endure, a reminder of how violent the solar system's early days truly were. Over millions of years, Earth's magma ocean gradually receded. Lava flows cooled into volcanic islands that jutted above the steaming seas. Storms carved channels through young rock, carrying minerals into the oceans. The atmosphere's carbon dioxide dissolved into the water, laying the groundwork for the complex chemistry that would one day support life. In this world of fire and steam, no creatures yet stirred. But the elements needed for life were present and on the move. Carbon and hydrogen mixed with nitrogen and oxygen, forming simple compounds. Lightning, ultraviolet radiation from the sun, and the heat from underwater volcanic vents provided the sparks for these molecules to combine and break apart again and again. Slowly, this restless churning of rock, water, and air set the stage for a new kind of transformation, one where geology would meet biology. Earth's magma ocean era is a testament to the power of natural forces working over immense timescales. From a molten sphere bombarded by cosmic debris, a stable crust and protective atmosphere emerged. The same processes that forged continents and oceans laid the foundation for every mountain range, every sea, every living thing to come. It was an age of extremes, but out of this fiery crucible came the conditions that would make Earth a living world. This was not a calm beginning. It was not gentle. Yet from this heat and chaos, our dynamic planet found its first steps toward becoming something more than just rock and gas. A place where life could one day take hold and thrive. Amid the chaos of Earth's fiery beginnings, one event stands out as perhaps the most dramatic of all: the colossal collision that would give our planet its moon. This single impact changed Earth forever, shaping its future climate, stabilizing its tilt, and leaving behind a companion that still influences our tides and nights today. Long before there were continents or life of any kind, Earth was a young, unstable planet. It was still gathering mass, drawing in leftover debris from the solar system's birth. All around it, space was littered with planetesimals, rocky bodies, some as small as pebbles, others as big as mountains. But among these drifting objects was a world much larger, a body roughly the size of Mars. Scientists have given it a name: Theia. Theia, like Earth, had formed from the same cloud of gas and dust that circled the infant sun. It, too, had been shaped by collisions and gravity, growing bigger as it swept up more and more material. For a while, Earth and Theia shared neighboring orbits around the sun, moving through space like cosmic dancers on intersecting paths. Inevitably, their paths would cross, drawn together by the same gravitational forces that had built them. The impact was catastrophic on a scale that's almost impossible to grasp. When Theia struck Earth, the energy released rivaled that of billions of nuclear bombs exploding all at once. The collision happened at an angle, a glancing blow rather than a direct hit, but it was enough to reshape both worlds in an instant. Rock and metal vaporized on contact, spraying molten debris far out into space. Mountains of Earth's crust were ripped away and flung into orbit. In the aftermath, Earth was a battered, half-molten sphere once again. A ring of debris, glowing with the heat of the impact, formed a halo around the planet. This fiery disk stretched thousands of miles into space, a swirling cloud of vaporized rock and metal fragments. For thousands of years, pieces of this debris collided and clumped together under the pull of gravity. Bit by bit, the pieces gathered into a single growing body: the Moon. At first, the Moon orbited much closer than it does today, appearing gigantic in the sky. From Earth's surface, if there had been anyone to see it, the newborn Moon would have filled a large portion of the horizon, glowing red-hot from its own molten birth. Over time, the Moon cooled and solidified, its surface scarred with impact craters from the last of the space debris that struck both worlds. While the Moon is a beautiful sight today, its formation had profound effects on Earth's evolution. One of its most important roles was stabilizing our planet's axial tilt. Without the Moon, Earth's axis could have wobbled wildly over millions of years, shifting climates dramatically and unpredictably. but the gravitational pull between Earth and its new satellite kept our tilt steady, creating more regular seasons and a climate that would later help life flourish. The Moon's gravitational pull also began to tug at Earth's early oceans. Even when the seas were shallow and the atmosphere thick with volcanic gases, the Moon's influence created tides, the rhythmic rise and fall of water along the shores. These early tides likely played an important role in the chemistry of Earth's shallow seas, mixing minerals and nutrients and helping set the stage for the first living cells. Evidence for this giant impact is found not only on Earth, but on the Moon itself. Samples of lunar rock brought back by the Apollo missions revealed something remarkable. The isotopic signature of the Moon's material is nearly identical to Earth's outer layers. This suggests that the Moon formed from Earth's own crust and mantle, blown into orbit by the force of the impact. No other explanation fits so perfectly. Today, when we look up at the Moon, it's easy to forget that this familiar face is the survivor of such an unimaginable collision. Its surface still holds the scars of its early years, countless craters left untouched by wind or rain because the Moon has no atmosphere to erase them. These craters tell the story of an era when the solar system was a cosmic shooting gallery, and the Moon, like Earth, bore the brunt of it. Back on Earth, the giant impact did more than just give us a moon. It helped shape the layers of our planet. Some scientists believe the collision melted much of Earth's outer shell, allowing the heavier elements to sink even deeper toward the core, while lighter rocks formed a new crust. This mixing of material may have played a role in creating the chemical diversity of Earth's surface, the minerals and elements that would later feed plants, build mountains, and sustain life. In the centuries and millennia after the Moon's formation, Earth continued to cool, though volcanoes still erupted across the surface, releasing gas and ash into the thick atmosphere. The constant dance between the Earth and its new companion also began to slow our planet's rotation. Long ago, a day on Earth may have lasted only 6 hours, but as the Moon's gravity pulled on our tides, some of Earth's rotational energy was transferred to the Moon's orbit, causing the Moon to slowly drift away. Even now, the Moon moves about 1.5 inches farther from Earth each year, and our days lengthen by a tiny fraction of a second. This subtle connection continues to shape life. The Moon's phases have guided human calendars and rituals for thousands of years. Its steady glow has lit the paths of nocturnal animals and inspired myths in every culture. Yet, it all began with a single, devastating impact that turned 2 separate worlds into a shared story. For scientists, the giant impact hypothesis remains one of the strongest explanations for the Moon's origin. It solves puzzles that no other theory can, from the Moon's unusual size compared to Earth to the similarity in their isotopic fingerprints. And it reminds us just how dynamic and violent our planet's earliest days were. Even as the rest of the solar system settled into relative calm, Earth's relationship with its Moon continued to evolve. Together, they set the rhythm of the tides, helped shape our climate, and influenced the evolution of life in ways we're still discovering. From the first tidal pools stirred by the Moon's pull to the migration patterns of countless animals that follow its phases, this ancient bond endures. Looking up at the night sky, it's easy to see the Moon as a quiet, gentle presence, but its origin is anything but quiet. It is the frozen memory of a time when planets collided and new worlds were forged from the debris. In this way, The moon is not just Earth's companion, it's a reminder that our planet is the result of both chance and cosmic violence, of collisions that destroyed and created in equal measure. The giant impact that brought the moon into being marks a turning point in Earth's long story. From the swirling disk of gas and dust to a molten planet battered by collisions, this single, powerful event paved the way for a world where oceans could form, climates could stabilize, and eventually, life could emerge. In the sky above, the moon still keeps watch, a silent witness to everything that has come since that moment when two worlds became one. After the fire and chaos of Earth's molten youth, a subtle yet world-changing shift began to unfold. The planet that had once been an ocean of lava was finally cooling. Volcanoes still spewed rivers of molten rock, and impacts from space continued, though less frequently now than before. But for the first time, something new began to collect on the surface: water. The story of Earth's first oceans is a tale of constant transformation, where fire met ice, where rock met rain, and where the seeds of life found their first true cradle. Scientists believe that as the planet cooled, the water vapor trapped in its thick, steamy atmosphere began to condense. For millions of years, clouds formed and storms raged, pouring rain down onto the hot, barren crust. Imagine the hiss and roar as endless sheets of water struck still warm volcanic plains, instantly turning to steam, then condensing and falling again in a relentless cycle. At first, these early rains couldn't survive for long. The young Earth's surface was still hot enough to vaporize water back into the air almost as quickly as it fell. But over time, volcanic eruptions vented more and more gases into the sky, building up an atmosphere dense enough to help insulate the planet. Meanwhile, the constant bombardment of meteorites and comets brought with them more water in the form of ice. Each impact added to Earth's growing reserves, until eventually the balance began to tip. Pools of water formed in the lowest places, filling basins and cracks in the cooling crust. These puddles gathered into lakes, then seas, then vast interconnected oceans that stretched for thousands of miles. By around 4.4 billion years ago, Earth may have already had liquid water covering significant portions of its surface, an astonishingly early start for such a seemingly fragile thing. Tiny zircon crystals discovered in ancient Australian rocks hold chemical fingerprints that suggest liquid water was present at this time, a clue hidden in the oldest mineral relics we can find. These first oceans would have looked very different from the deep blue waters we know today. They were likely greenish or even brownish in color, filled with dissolved minerals and chemicals leached from the raw young crust. Underwater volcanoes constantly erupted on the ocean floor, releasing more gases and minerals, shaping a dynamic underwater landscape of ridges and trenches. The atmosphere above these seas was thick with carbon dioxide and methane, poisonous to us now, but crucial for trapping heat and keeping the planet warm enough to prevent the oceans from freezing solid. Without a protective ozone layer, ultraviolet radiation from the young sun bombarded the surface, breaking apart molecules and driving chemical reactions in the shallow waters. Lightning storms lit up the skies, and volcanic islands erupted through the seas, building the first primitive land masses that jutted above the waves. It was a world of dramatic contrasts. Calm, steamy oceans one moment, then sudden storms and eruptions reshaping the coastline the next. These early oceans did more than simply cover the earth in water. They became a vast chemical laboratory. In the warm, mineral-rich shallows, simple molecules dissolved, mixed, and reacted with each other. Heat from underwater hydrothermal vents, combined with the energy from sunlight and lightning, helped drive these reactions forward. Slowly, from simple ingredients like carbon dioxide, ammonia, and methane, more complex organic molecules began to form. Amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, simple sugars, and fatty acids gathered and recombined in countless ways. This chemical soup was the stage for one of the most profound moments in Earth's history, the emergence of life. Although the exact process remains one of science's greatest mysteries, many researchers believe that Earth's first living organisms may have arisen around deep-sea hydrothermal vents. These vents, spewing mineral-rich, superheated water into the cold ocean depths, created unique environments where life could gain a foothold. Protected from the sun's harsh radiation, these underwater chimneys provided heat and a constant supply of chemicals needed for primitive life to form. The appearance of Earth's first oceans also triggered major geological changes. As rain fell for millions of years, it weathered the young volcanic rocks, breaking them down and carrying minerals back into the seas. This gradual erosion released salts and other elements that began to accumulate in the water, slowly turning the oceans salty, a process that continues to this day. Meanwhile, the newly formed oceans played a crucial role in moderating Earth's climate. Water has a remarkable ability to absorb and store heat. By covering vast areas of the surface, the oceans acted as a giant thermostat, smoothing out temperature extremes between day and night, and between the equator and the poles. Without this effect, Earth's climate would have swung wildly, making it far more difficult for life to gain a foothold. Another important role of these ancient seas was in helping to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As rainwater fell and interacted with volcanic rocks, chemical reactions locked carbon away in minerals like limestone. Some of this carbon was carried into the oceans, where it settled into sediments on the seafloor. This slow but steady process helped reduce greenhouse gases in the air, cooling the planet and paving the way for more stable conditions. Yet, the balance was delicate. Even after the oceans formed, Earth still faced threats from space. Giant impacts continued, though they happened less frequently than during the planet's earliest days. Some of these impacts were so large that they vaporized parts of the oceans and blasted rock and steam high into the atmosphere, temporarily transforming the climate. But each time, the rains returned, the basins refilled, and the cycle began anew. As the centuries turned into millions of years, Earth's crust thickened and cooled further. Small volcanic islands merged to form the first proto-continents, patches of dry land that rose above the seas. These early land masses were barren, rocky expanses with no soil or plants to hold them together, yet they too played a vital role. As waves crashed against these shores, minerals and nutrients washed back into the oceans, fueling the chemical reactions that would support early microbial life. By about 4 billion years ago, Earth's oceans had become a permanent fixture, covering most of the planet's surface. From space, Earth would have appeared as a vast water world, dotted with volcanoes and primitive islands, all shrouded in a thick, hazy atmosphere. Beneath those ancient waves, the building blocks of life were gathering, reacting, and evolving into forms that would eventually learn to harness energy, replicate themselves, and adapt to their surroundings. The story of Earth's first oceans reminds us that water is not just a feature of our world, it is its lifeblood. These early seas absorbed the heat of a still cooling planet, shielded fragile molecules from harsh radiation, and provided the medium in which life's first steps could unfold. Every drop of water in our rivers, lakes, and cells today can be traced back to those rains that first fell on a barren volcanic landscape billions of years ago. Without the oceans, there would be no weather, no rivers carving valleys, no cycles of evaporation and rain to renew the land. The oceans set the stage for all that was to come. The rise of photosynthetic life that would fill the air with oxygen, the slow drift of continents across the globe, the evolution of plants and animals, and eventually the emergence of human beings to ponder their ancient origins. From the hiss of steam rising from newly formed lakes to the endless motion of waves shaping the shorelines, these first oceans marked the beginning of Earth's transformation from a fiery rock into a living planet. They were the great connector, the link between stone and sky, heat and cold, chemistry and biology. In these ancient waters, life found its first sanctuary, and the Earth's long story turned a new page. Beneath the surface of Earth's ancient oceans, something extraordinary began to unfold. For hundreds of millions of years, the planet had been a world of rock, water, and gas, lifeless yet full of potential. The ingredients for life had gathered in warm, shallow pools, in deep cracks beneath the ocean floor, and around mineral-rich underwater vents. And in these hidden places, the first living things took shape. No one knows the exact moment when simple chemicals crossed the threshold into something more. But scientists believe it happened more than 3.5 billion years ago, perhaps as early as 4 billion years ago. All the pieces were there: carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions, nitrogen and methane in the thick atmosphere, and abundant water acting as a vast chemical laboratory. Lightning strikes, ultraviolet radiation, and heat from Earth's interior provided the energy to drive chemical reactions forward. One leading idea is that life's earliest building blocks formed around hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. These vents, often called black smokers, release superheated water rich in minerals and dissolved gases. In the darkness of the deep sea, these vents create towering chimneys of mineral deposits, surrounded by unique chemical gradients that provide an ideal setting for complex reactions. Here, hot, mineral-laden water meets the cold ocean, creating conditions that allow simple molecules to combine and break apart in endless cycles. Through countless trials and errors over unimaginable timescales, these reactions gave rise to more complex organic molecules. Simple amino acids linked into proteins, nucleotides formed chains of RNA, and fatty acids assembled into tiny bubbles that could trap other molecules inside. It's hard to picture how chaotic and delicate this early chemistry must have been. Yet somewhere among the trillions of combinations, a few arrangements managed to copy themselves. Self-replication is one of the defining features of life, and once it appeared, evolution had its first foothold. In the beginning, these primitive life forms were little more than microscopic blobs of chemicals. They drifted in the warm seas, clinging to cracks in rocks, feeding on the simple molecules that surrounded them. These first cells, what scientists call prokaryotes, lacked a nucleus or any complex structures, but they held within them the remarkable power to copy themselves and to change. Natural selection began its slow, patient work, favoring the tiny variations that helped these early cells survive harsh conditions. For millions of years, life remained simple. It didn't need to be anything else. Single-celled organisms floated freely in the oceans, multiplying and evolving in ways we can only imagine. Some found niches around hydrothermal vents, relying on the chemical energy released from Earth's interior. Others drifted closer to the surface, where they discovered another source of energy: sunlight. The ability to harness sunlight marked one of the most important turning points in Earth's history. Certain microbes developed the capacity to capture light and use it to build sugars from carbon dioxide and water, a process known as photosynthesis. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It was the result of gradual changes in the tiny molecular machines within cells, as evolution tested countless variations until one worked. Cyanobacteria, sometimes called blue-green algae, were among the earliest and most successful of these light-harvesting microbes. Living in sunlit shallows and warm tidal flats, they grew in dense mats that covered rocks and sediments. Over time, these microbial mats formed structures called stromatolites, which still exist today in a few remote places like Shark Bay in Western Australia. These layered mounds are living fossils, offering a glimpse of the thriving microbial communities that once dominated Earth's young oceans. As cyanobacteria photosynthesized, they released a byproduct that would change the planet forever: oxygen. At first, the oxygen produced was absorbed by dissolved iron in the oceans, forming vast deposits of banded iron formations that now make up some of the world's richest iron ore reserves. But eventually, the oxygen began to build up in the atmosphere. This slow release of oxygen into the air is known as the Great Oxygenation Event, and it transformed Earth from a world suited only for anaerobic microbes into one that could support more complex life forms. Yet oxygen was both a blessing and a curse. For early anaerobic organisms, it was a deadly poison, disrupting the chemical reactions they depended on. Many of these microbes retreated into low-oxygen environments, deep muds, ocean vents, and other hidden places where they still exist today. For other life forms, oxygen opened up new possibilities. It made more efficient energy production possible through aerobic respiration, paving the way for larger, more complex cells to evolve millions of years later. The spark of life that began in the deep didn't remain confined to one environment. Microbes spread into every corner of Earth's oceans, adapting to extreme heat near vents, freezing cold at the poles, acidic pools near volcanoes, and sunlit shallows. Some microbes even began to cooperate, forming colonies where different types of cells specialized in different tasks. This cooperative behavior would eventually lead to the development of multicellular life, but that leap was still far in the future. The evidence for Earth's earliest life is preserved in some of its oldest rocks. Tiny fossils of microbial filaments and chemical signatures of ancient metabolism have been found in rocks over 3.5 billion years old in places like Australia and Greenland. These ancient traces remind us that life began in forms so small they would have been invisible to the naked eye. Yet they were powerful enough to reshape the atmosphere, the oceans, and even the rocks themselves. It's humbling to realize how resilient these early life forms were. They endured meteorite impacts that could vaporize whole regions of the ocean. They survived in a world without an ozone layer, exposed to intense ultraviolet radiation. They found ways to adapt to shifting temperatures, changing chemical conditions, and the constant upheaval of Earth's surface. In their tiny, fragile bodies, they carried the first spark of a process that would lead, eventually, to forests, coral reefs, and creatures that would walk on land. Life's emergence in the deep sea reminds us that sometimes the harshest, most unlikely places can be the birthplace of extraordinary things. Hydrothermal vents, which to us seem so alien and inhospitable, offered warmth and a constant supply of minerals. They provided the gradients of energy that life needed to bridge the gap between chemistry and biology. Even today, complex communities of organisms thrive around these vents, from giant tube worms to unique bacteria that feed on sulfur compounds. As the billions of years passed, Earth's early oceans continued to nurture and spread these tiny pioneers. Microbes formed mats on shallow seafloors, carpets on underwater volcanoes, and colonies in every drop of seawater. The genetic experiments playing out within each cell gave rise to endless diversity. Some microbes developed new ways to harvest energy, while others found ways to share genes, speeding up evolution. From the smallest chemical spark to the first simple cells, the oceans became a living engine of transformation. The same ingredients that had rained down from the sky or arrived on icy comets were now part of a vast, interconnected web of living things, each microscopic cell a testament to the power of chance, time, and the restless energy of Earth itself. In the quiet depths where sunlight could not reach, life learned to thrive on Earth's inner heat. In the shallows, it learned to capture light from above. These first experiments in survival and energy paved the way for everything that would follow. The explosion of complex life, the rise of animals and plants, and the long, winding path that would eventually lead to us. From these tiny, resilient beginnings, life began its remarkable story on Earth, a story that continues to evolve every day. For hundreds of millions of years, Earth's oceans were home to tiny, simple life forms that quietly transformed the planet in ways that would change everything that came after. These single-celled organisms lived in shadows and sunlit shallows, drifting through warm seas or clinging to rocks along the coastlines. They had no eyes to see the vastness around them, no minds to understand the impact they were about to have. Yet their slow, steady work would shift Earth's atmosphere, rewrite the chemical balance of the oceans, and set the stage for the explosion of more complex life. One group of microbes in particular played the starring role in this transformation: cyanobacteria. These remarkable organisms developed a way to capture the energy of sunlight and use it to power chemical reactions that turned carbon dioxide and water into sugars, a process we know as photosynthesis. As a byproduct, they released oxygen gas into the surrounding water. For us, oxygen is the air we breathe, so familiar that it's easy to forget how revolutionary its presence was at the time. At first, the oxygen produced by cyanobacteria didn't build up in the atmosphere. Instead, it reacted with the dissolved iron in Earth's oceans. Iron is highly reactive with oxygen, and in the ancient seas, it existed in vast quantities. As the microbes released more oxygen, it combined with the iron to form rust-like particles that drifted down and settled on the ocean floor. Over millions of years, these iron oxide layers built up into thick deposits known today as banded iron formations, striking red and gray layers that still supply much of the world's iron ore. These ancient iron deposits are the stone pages of a record that shows how oxygen gradually transformed Earth's surface. Each band is like a bookmark in time, marking an era when the balance between oxygen production and iron in the seas shifted back and forth. As long as there was plenty of dissolved iron, oxygen didn't accumulate in the air. It stayed locked in the rocks below. But eventually, the cyanobacteria outpaced the ocean's iron reserves. The available iron was used up, bound into layers that settled into the deep sea. Once that happened, the oxygen produced by photosynthesis could no longer be absorbed so easily. Instead, it began to leak out of the oceans and into the atmosphere above. This slow but steady buildup of oxygen is known as the Great Oxygenation event, sometimes called the Oxygen Catastrophe because of how dramatically it reshaped the world. It began around 2.4 billion years ago, though its effects unfolded over tens of millions of years. For early Earth, it was a turning point as profound as the formation of the oceans themselves. The arrival of free oxygen in the atmosphere was both a gift and a crisis. For the simple anaerobic microbes that had evolved in a world without oxygen, it was deadly. Oxygen is highly reactive, and for organisms not adapted to it, it can damage cell structures, disrupt vital chemical reactions, and cause oxidative stress. Many ancient microbes found themselves poisoned by the very gas they had never encountered before. Entire populations died off, driven into extinction by an atmosphere they could no longer tolerate. Some anaerobic species managed to survive by retreating into places where oxygen could not reach, deep underground, in ocean sediments, and within the tiny spaces inside rocks. Even today, some of their descendants still thrive in oxygen-free environments, reminding us of an older version of our planet when the air we now rely on would have been toxic. But for other forms of life, the rise of oxygen opened extraordinary new opportunities. Oxygen made possible a more efficient way to extract energy from food: aerobic respiration. Compared to anaerobic processes, aerobic metabolism releases far more energy, allowing cells to grow larger, develop new structures, and, eventually, combine into more complex multicellular organisms. The groundwork for the future explosion of plants, animals, and fungi was laid by this new chemical reality. The Great Oxygenation event also triggered profound changes in the physical environment. As oxygen levels rose, they began to react with gases in the atmosphere. One of the most important of these was methane, a powerful greenhouse gas that had helped keep early Earth warm under a faint young sun. Oxygen combined with methane to form carbon dioxide and water vapor, both of which trap heat less effectively than methane does. As a result, the planet's climate cooled dramatically. Many scientists believe that this cooling contributed to one of Earth's first major ice ages, a period sometimes called Snowball Earth. Ice sheets may have advanced far beyond the poles, covering much of the planet in glaciers and snow. Evidence for these early glaciations can be found in ancient rocks that show signs of having formed beneath thick layers of ice. For tiny life forms, this global chill added another challenge to the oxygen-rich environment they were already struggling to adapt to. Yet, life proved resilient. Some microbes evolved ways to detoxify oxygen or even harness it for their own benefit. Others formed protective structures or developed new enzymes to cope with the oxidative stress. The survivors emerged stronger, carrying forward the genetic innovations that would make future evolution possible. Another consequence of increasing oxygen levels was the formation of Earth's ozone layer. High in the atmosphere, some of the free oxygen molecules combined to form ozone, O3. This thin shield began to absorb much of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation, protecting life on the surface and in shallow waters. Before the ozone layer formed, life was mostly confined to the oceans, where water acted as a natural barrier against the sun's harsh rays. With the ozone layer in place, the surface of the continents would eventually become more hospitable, setting the stage for the spread of life onto land hundreds of millions of years later. Meanwhile, Earth's oceans continued to change. As oxygen mixed with other dissolved elements, it transformed the chemistry of the seas. New minerals formed, new cycles of nutrients began to take hold, and ecosystems adapted in response. Cyanobacteria themselves flourished in the shallows, building up thick mats that produced even more oxygen, reinforcing the transformation they had begun. In rocks around the world, from ancient deposits in Australia and South Africa to Canada and Greenland, the traces of this monumental event are preserved like a silent witness to life's power to reshape an entire planet. Geologists still study these iron-rich layers and the signs of early glaciations to piece together how Earth's atmosphere and climate evolved in step with its smallest inhabitants. The Great Oxygenation event shows how even the simplest life can become a force of planetary change. Single-celled microbes, no larger than a speck of dust, rewrote the chemistry of the air and oceans with each tiny burst of photosynthesis. They made the world both more dangerous and more promising at the same time. Without them, Earth would never have become the living world we know today. The place where forests breathe, animals roam, and our own lungs draw in oxygen with every breath. The story of this event is not only about life's power to adapt, but also about its power to alter its own destiny. What began as a way to capture sunlight turned into a force that shaped the course of evolution, changed the climate, and built the protective shield of ozone that still guards us today. In these early seas and skies, the planet's future took a decisive turn. From this point on, Earth was never the same, and neither was life's potential. After the Great Oxygenation event, Earth's climate shifted in ways that few living things could have anticipated. For millions of years, the oxygen released by cyanobacteria had slowly transformed the atmosphere, altering the balance of greenhouse gases that kept the planet warm. As oxygen levels rose, methane, a powerful heat-trapping gas, was broken down by chemical reactions, replaced by carbon dioxide and water vapor that trapped heat less effectively. The result was a world teetering on the edge of a deep freeze. Evidence preserved in ancient rocks tells us that Earth may have plunged into its most extreme ice ages during this time. Geologists call these frozen episodes Snowball Earth events, because they believe the planet may have been entirely or nearly entirely encased in ice, from the poles all the way to the equator. It is a mind-bending image. The same Earth that once glowed red-hot as a molten sphere, now locked beneath miles of glittering glaciers and endless fields of snow. How could such a dramatic transformation happen? The process began slowly, as sunlight reflected off expanding ice sheets near the poles. Ice and snow reflect far more sunlight than dark ocean water or bare rock. This reflection, known as the albedo effect, amplified cooling even more. As glaciers grew, they bounced more solar energy back into space, which caused temperatures to drop further, which caused more ice to form in a self-reinforcing loop. Once this process reached a tipping point, the glaciers spread outward until they covered nearly every landmass and much of the oceans. Fossil evidence for these ancient ice ages is found in the most unlikely places. Glacial deposits in what are now tropical regions like Africa, Australia, and South America. Rocks that show the telltale signs of having been scratched and carried by glaciers, called glacial striations, appear in bands across continents that would have been near the equator at the time. This suggests that even regions bathed in direct sunlight for much of the year were not spared from the ice. Beneath the ice, life found ways to survive, although conditions must have been harsh beyond imagination. Microbial communities likely clung to hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, where the planet's inner heat still seeped through cracks in the crust. These vents would have created pockets of warmth and chemical energy in an otherwise frozen sea, offering safe havens for life to persist. In other places, thin films of liquid water may have remained just below the surface ice, insulated by the thick frozen lid above. Within these narrow layers, hardy bacteria and simple organisms could have continued to grow and reproduce, sustained by nutrients carried through cracks and currents. Some scientists believe that even during the most severe glaciations, open patches of ocean, called polynyas, may have existed around volcanic islands or along tectonic boundaries, where geothermal heat kept the water from freezing completely. Meanwhile, the surface of Earth would have been almost unrecognizable. Massive glaciers crept across the continents, grinding mountains into dust and carving deep valleys and fjords. The landscape echoed with the cracking and groaning of ice sheets moving under their own weight. Above, sunlight reflected off the endless white expanse, while the atmosphere grew thinner and colder. But this frozen world could not last forever. Deep beneath the ice, Earth's inner workings continued unchanged. Volcanoes still erupted, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. With most of the planet's surface covered by ice and snow, chemical weathering, the process by which carbon dioxide is normally removed from the atmosphere by reacting with rocks, slowed to a near halt. The balance was broken. Carbon dioxide from volcanic eruptions continued to build up, but little was absorbed by the frozen continents. Over millions of years, carbon dioxide levels slowly climbed. It was like filling a sealed greenhouse, drop by drop. Eventually, the greenhouse effect returned with a vengeance. Once carbon dioxide reached high enough concentrations, it began to trap more and more of the sun's heat. The planet's surface warmed, ice began to melt, and the albedo effect reversed. Darker water and rock absorbed more sunlight, accelerating the thaw in a runaway process that turned a snowball back into a water world. When the ice finally receded, the change was dramatic. Torrents of meltwater poured into the oceans, carrying with them vast amounts of nutrients ground from the land by the glaciers. This sudden influx of minerals may have triggered blooms of microscopic life in the seas, jump-starting new evolutionary leaps. The end of a snowball Earth event likely unleashed massive storms, floods, and shifts in ocean currents, reshaping the climate and habitats in ways that forced life to adapt once again. One of the most remarkable clues from this time is the presence of what geologists call cap carbonates, thick layers of carbonate rock that blanket glacial deposits around the world. These rocks formed when the newly warmed oceans absorbed the massive amounts of carbon dioxide that had built up during the freeze. The gas dissolved into the water, allowing carbonate minerals to precipitate and settle into layers. These cap carbonates are a vivid marker of just how sudden and dramatic the transition from frozen wasteland to warm, nutrient-rich seas could be. The Snowball Earth episodes didn't just reshape landscapes. They set the stage for life to diversify and flourish in new ways. Some scientists believe that the intense stresses of the frozen world forced organisms to develop new survival strategies, spurring the evolution of multicellular life. Genetic evidence suggests that many groups of complex organisms trace their roots back to the aftermath of these extreme ice ages, when the planet's environment swung from one extreme to another. These massive glaciations also helped shape the continents. As glaciers advanced and retreated, they scoured the land, redistributed sediments, and left behind rich soils that would one day support forests and grasslands. Deep fjords, vast plains, and dramatic mountain valleys owe their shapes, in part, to the grinding force of ancient ice. Even today, the legacy of Snowball Earth lingers in our understanding of climate. The idea that our entire planet can swing from a warm, life-friendly state to an almost entirely frozen ball and back again shows how sensitive Earth's systems are to shifts in atmosphere and sunlight. It also reminds us that the conditions we think of as normal are just brief moments in a much longer and wilder story. Throughout all these cycles of freezing and thawing, life found a way to endure. Tiny, hardy microbes adapted to darkness and cold, surviving where warmth still seeped up from below. Some of these ancient survivors would pass on their resilience to new generations, laying the foundation for the explosion of complex life that would follow. The world that emerged from under the ice would be primed for dramatic evolutionary leaps, including the Cambrian Explosion, when life took on shapes and forms the planet had never seen before. In this way, Earth's frozen ages were not just chapters of destruction or dormancy. They were periods of preparation and hidden invention, times when the planet's surface was being reset and its living inhabitants quietly evolved new strategies to thrive. As the ice receded and sunlight returned, the Earth that once glowed white with frozen seas became fertile ground for the next great act in the story of life. From blazing molten rock to a world locked in ice, Earth proved again that change is its only constant, and that every extreme holds the seeds of what comes next. When the thick glaciers of Earth's ancient ice ages finally retreated, the world emerged from under its frozen shell with conditions ready for something remarkable. For billions of years, life had been dominated by simple, single-celled organisms and tiny colonies clinging to rocks and vents. But once the climate stabilized and the oceans filled with nutrients washed from newly exposed land, life found an opportunity to experiment on an entirely new scale. This was the beginning of one of the most extraordinary chapters in Earth's history, the Cambrian Explosion. Roughly 541 million years ago, the Cambrian period opened a window on an age when living things began to grow not just in number, but in complexity and form. What had once been a world of tiny, nearly invisible microbes and simple multicellular mats suddenly burst into an astonishing variety of shapes, body plans, and survival strategies. In the fossil record, the evidence appears as if life turned a corner overnight. though in reality it unfolded over tens of millions of years. Before this time, the Ediacaran period had already seen the first hints of more complex life. Soft-bodied organisms that looked like fronds, discs, or quilted cushions lying on the ocean floor. But these creatures left behind few clear traces. Then came the Cambrian, and with it, hard parts, shells, exoskeletons, and mineralized structures that preserved well in sediments. These tougher body parts not only protected the animals, but also made their fossil record far more visible to us today. In shallow seas that spread across the young continents, life blossomed into an underwater world of diversity. Many of these new creatures were small by modern standards, some no larger than a fingernail, but they represented the first true explosion of complex ecosystems. Trilobites, with their armored segments and compound eyes, crawled across the seafloor in huge numbers. Some species burrowed into the mud, leaving behind trails that show us how they moved and fed. Other creatures swam freely, propelled by fins and flexible bodies, searching for prey or escaping predators. This era saw the birth of almost all the major animal groups we still recognize today. Early ancestors of arthropods, mollusks, worms, and even primitive vertebrates made their first appearances. Fossils like Anomalocaris, a strange, shrimp-like predator with grasping appendages and a circular, tooth-lined mouth, reveal how some species evolved to hunt for the first time. Others developed hard shells and spines in response, an evolutionary arms race that would shape the balance between predator and prey for millions of years to come. One of the most iconic fossil sites from this time is the Burgess Shale, high in the mountains of British Columbia, Canada. Discovered in the early 20th century, this extraordinary deposit preserves the delicate remains of soft-bodied Cambrian creatures in stunning detail. Through these fossils, paleontologists have pieced together an image of an ancient marine ecosystem teeming with bizarre life forms that defy easy comparison to modern animals. There were Opabenia, with 5 eyes and a long claw-tipped nozzle, Hallucigenia, with spines jutting from its back like a living pincushion, and Wiwaxia, a slug-like animal armored with overlapping plates and spikes. What fueled this sudden leap in diversity? Several factors came together at just the right time. The end of the global ice ages meant that vast amounts of minerals were released into the oceans, providing essential nutrients like calcium and phosphate. These minerals allowed organisms to build hard parts for the first time, shells, plates, and spines that offered protection and new ways to interact with their environment. At the same time, rising oxygen levels in the atmosphere and oceans supported larger, more active animals. Oxygen made it possible for creatures to grow bigger and move faster, powering the muscles and circulatory systems needed for predation and escape. With predators on the prowl, prey species evolved defensive adaptations in response. This feedback loop drove rapid innovation in body shapes, behaviors, and ways of life. Another factor was the evolution of sight. Fossil evidence suggests that the first compound eyes appeared around this time, giving animals the ability to detect light, shapes, and movement with far greater precision than ever before. Vision transformed the oceans into an environment where camouflage, speed, and deception became powerful tools for survival. It was a major step in the evolutionary arms race. Once animals could see, they could hunt, flee, or hide in entirely new ways. The Cambrian seas were not silent or empty. They were alive with swarms of plankton, filter-feeding sponges, burrowing worms, and strange creatures drifting on gentle currents. Algae bloomed in the sunlit shallows, providing food at the base of the food chain. Coral-like structures, though still primitive, began to form early reef systems, creating complex habitats where countless species could find shelter and new niches. These early marine ecosystems grew more intricate as new species evolved to fill every available role. Some animals grazed on microbial mats covering the seafloor. Others sifted nutrients from the water or scavenged the remains of the dead. Predators lurked in deeper waters, while smaller animals learned to hide among the crevices of rocky outcrops or burrow into the mud. Every new adaptation opened the door to more possibilities, and life branched into more forms than ever before. While the Cambrian explosion seems sudden in the fossil record, it was the result of countless experiments in survival. Not every lineage succeeded. Many creatures appeared for a time and then vanished, leaving behind no descendants. Others gave rise to major animal groups that would persist for hundreds of millions of years, weathering mass extinctions, climate shifts, and the relentless push of evolution. The legacy of this period is profound. The basic body plans, or blueprints, of animals were established in these Cambrian seas. Bilateral symmetry, exoskeletons, segmented bodies, primitive backbones. All these features emerged during this window of time. Once these designs proved successful, they became the foundations for the incredible diversity of life that would follow. Fish, insects, crustaceans, reptiles, birds, mammals, all trace their roots back to innovations that took shape in these ancient waters. Even today, scientists continue to uncover new fossils that add pieces to the puzzle of how the Cambrian explosion unfolded. Each discovery sheds light on the relationships between early species, the conditions of Earth's climate and oceans at the time, and the intricate web of life that first took hold when complex animals appeared in force. The Cambrian period ended after about 55 million years, but the changes it set in motion never truly stopped. Life's story from that point forward would be one of expansion into new environments, adaptation to ever-changing conditions, and the endless dance of predator and prey. The spark that ignited in those sunlit, nutrient-rich seas would carry forward through coral reefs, swamps, forests, and eventually onto land, a legacy of experimentation and resilience that continues to this day. The oceans had become a stage for life to push its boundaries, and life would never turn back. Long after life burst into dazzling variety in Earth's ancient seas, a quiet but profound transition began. The oceans had been life's safe cradle for billions of years, shielding fragile organisms from harsh ultraviolet radiation and the extremes of weather that battered the barren land above the tide. But as new forms of life evolved, some would find reasons to inch closer to the shore, venturing out onto rock and sand where no living thing had ever thrived before. The first steps onto land would transform Earth's landscapes forever. In the Cambrian and early Ordovician periods, life was still almost entirely confined to water. Rocky shorelines were lifeless, battered by waves and storms, offering no soil, no shade, and no nutrients except for what wind and rain might deliver. The conditions were harsh and unpredictable. Yet, just above the waterline, there were rewards waiting for any organism hardy enough to survive the challenges: abundant sunlight for energy, untouched resources, and the promise of new territory free of predators and competition. The pioneers of this new frontier were not animals, but plants and fungi. Long before the first fish flopped onto a muddy riverbank, mats of green algae had begun clinging to damp rocks in the intertidal zones. These simple algae were adapted to fluctuating conditions, sometimes submerged, sometimes exposed to air and drying winds. Over millions of years, they developed traits that helped them survive these extremes, including protective coatings to reduce water loss. From these humble beginnings, true land plants began to emerge. Fossil evidence suggests that by around 470 million years ago, the first primitive plants had begun to grow on land. These early pioneers were small and low to the ground, moss-like plants without roots, stems, or leaves as we know them today. They drew water directly from the thin films of moisture on rocks and soil, surviving in damp habitats where evaporation couldn't dry them out completely. Their arrival changed the land in subtle but far-reaching ways. Tiny root-like structures called rhizoids anchored these plants to rock, slowly breaking down the minerals beneath them through physical and chemical weathering. As the rocks crumbled into finer particles, the first thin layers of soil formed. Decaying plant matter mixed with sand and silt, creating a more hospitable surface for other plants to take hold. Meanwhile, fungi formed partnerships with these early plants. Fungal filaments extended into the soil, helping plants absorb nutrients and water more efficiently than they could alone. In return, the plants supplied the fungi with sugars produced through photosynthesis. These early mycorrhizal relationships were crucial. Without them, many primitive plants might never have gained the foothold needed to spread further inland. As plants diversified, they grew more complex. They evolved waxy cuticles to reduce water loss, pores called stomata to control gas exchange, and eventually vascular tissues, internal networks that transported water and nutrients more efficiently. With these innovations, plants could grow taller and colonize drier ground. By the late Silurian and early Devonian periods, small forests of primitive ferns, horsetails, and club mosses began to appear. These early forests were modest by today's standards, with plants rarely reaching more than a few meters high. But they were enough to transform bare rock into a living green carpet. The spread of plants onto land created new habitats that would soon attract animals. The first animals to venture out were likely simple invertebrates, arthropods such as millipedes, centipedes, mites, and primitive relatives of insects. Some of the earliest evidence of land animals comes from fossilized trackways, the delicate imprints of tiny legs crawling across ancient mudflats. These creatures probably fed on decaying plant material and microbial mats, helping to break down organic matter and recycle nutrients into the soil. For these early land animals, survival meant developing ways to keep their bodies from drying out. Their hard exoskeletons, inherited from their marine ancestors, provided a natural barrier against water loss and offered protection from the sun's ultraviolet rays. Some arthropods likely returned to the water often to stay moist or laid their eggs in damp environments to keep them from drying out. Over millions of years, the animal kingdom's boldest pioneers became more adventurous. Amphibious vertebrates, distant relatives of modern amphibians, began to appear during the late Devonian period, around 375 million years ago. These creatures evolved from lobe-finned fish, that had strong muscular fins and primitive lungs that allowed them to gulp air when oxygen levels in stagnant swamps ran low. Fossil evidence shows that these fish gradually developed stronger bones and joints in their fins, enabling them to push themselves through shallow water or along muddy banks. One of the most famous transitional fossils from this time is Tiktaalik, discovered in rocks over 375 million years old. Tiktaalik had features of both fish and early tetrapods, the four-limbed vertebrates that would eventually include amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. It had scales and gills like a fish, but also a neck, robust ribs, and limb-like fins with bones resembling wrists. These adaptations allowed it to prop itself up in shallow water or even haul itself onto mudflats in search of food. The movement of vertebrates onto land marked a major milestone in the history of life. For the first time, animals could exploit the vast resources of terrestrial environments. Insects soon followed, evolving wings that allowed them to reach plants that other animals could not. Early forests became buzzing with primitive insects feeding on leaves, spores, and each other. The expansion of plants and animals onto land transformed Earth's atmosphere and climate. As plants spread, they pulled more carbon dioxide out of the air through photosynthesis, contributing to long-term cooling trends. Their roots anchored soil, preventing erosion and helping to build stable ecosystems. Over time, decomposing plant matter accumulated into thick layers of peat and, eventually, coal deposits, the ancient remains of these first forests. The first steps onto land did not happen in a single moment, but through countless tiny experiments spread over millions of years. Each algae mat clinging to a rock, each insect venturing across a damp leaf, each fish pushing through shallow pools added a small piece to the story. Together, these fragile pioneers changed Earth from a barren world of bare rock and shallow seas to a living landscape teeming with green and alive with movement. Once life established itself on land, it never turned back. Plants would grow taller, evolve seeds to spread further, and eventually flowers to attract pollinators. Animals would adapt in every imaginable way, filling the skies, forests, deserts, and mountains with new forms. The journey from water to land opened up possibilities that shaped the entire future of life on Earth. The traces of this transition remain all around us. Forests that breathe out oxygen, insects that pollinate crops and wildflowers, rivers that carry nutrients from mountains to valleys. Each one is a reminder of a time when the edge of a pond or the damp surface of a mossy rock was the frontier of life's boldest adventure, the moment when the world above the waves became a place to call home. When life finally gained a firm hold on land, Earth entered one of its most astonishing and iconic eras, an age when creatures of unimaginable size and diversity roamed forests, plains, and swamps. This was the reign of the dinosaurs, a dynasty that would last for more than 160 million years. Their story is etched into stone and bone scattered across every continent, a record of survival and change that still shapes our understanding of life today. Long before dinosaurs appeared, the continents looked nothing like they do now. About 250 million years ago, Earth's land masses were fused into a single colossal supercontinent called Pangaea. This vast land connected nearly all of Earth's dry regions into one continuous stretch, surrounded by a massive global ocean called Panthalassa. Pangaea's sheer size meant that much of its interior was dry and seasonal, with harsh deserts, monsoon-like rains, and wide stretches of forests and floodplains. In this world, reptiles had already emerged as dominant land animals, having evolved from early amphibians during the Carboniferous and Permian periods. But it was in the wake of a catastrophe that dinosaurs found their opening. Around 252 million years ago, Earth experienced the worst mass extinction in its history, the Permian-Triassic extinction event, sometimes called the Great Dying. Volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia unleashed massive amounts of greenhouse gases, causing runaway global warming, ocean acidification, and the collapse of countless ecosystems. Nearly 90% of all marine species and 70% of land species vanished. From the ashes of this devastation, life slowly rebounded. Among the survivors were small, nimble reptiles that would become the ancestors of the first true dinosaurs. These early creatures had strong legs positioned under their bodies instead of splayed out to the sides like many reptiles before them, giving them better balance and stamina for life on land. This new body plan allowed them to run faster and stay active longer, advantages that helped them thrive in the unpredictable climates of the Triassic period. Fossil evidence shows that by around 230 million years ago, the first true dinosaurs had appeared. They were not the giant thunder lizards we often imagine, but small, lightly built animals. Some were bipedal, walking on two legs. Others moved on all fours. Over time, these early dinosaurs branched into diverse groups that adapted to every available niche. Some evolved long necks and huge bodies to graze on treetops. Others developed sharp claws and teeth to become fierce predators. One of the earliest well-known dinosaurs was Herrerasaurus, a sleek, two-legged hunter that stalked its prey in what is now South America. Another, Plateosaurus, a large plant eater, roamed the floodplains of Europe, growing up to 10 meters long. These early forms laid the groundwork for what would follow as the Jurassic period dawned. The breakup of Pangaea into smaller continents during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods created new coastlines, inland seas, and a wider variety of habitats. This geological rearrangement fueled a wave of evolutionary diversification. Lush forests of ferns, cycads, and conifers covered the land, providing ample food for giant herbivores. In turn, these massive plant eaters became prey for even larger carnivores. It was during this time that some of the most famous dinosaurs appeared. Sauropods, the long-necked giants like Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and Argentinosaurus, towered over ancient forests. These animals grew to astonishing sizes, some reaching lengths of more than 30 meters and weights of up to 70 tons. Their long necks allowed them to strip leaves from tall trees, while their massive bodies housed enormous digestive systems needed to process the vast amounts of plant matter they consumed daily. Alongside these giants, armored dinosaurs like Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus evolved protective plates, spikes, and clubbed tails to fend off predators. Horned dinosaurs like Triceratops developed elaborate frills and horns that may have served both for defense and display. Meanwhile, swift, sharp-toothed hunters like Allosaurus and later Tyrannosaurus rex stalked their prey with keen senses and powerful jaws. Dinosaurs were not the only remarkable creatures to appear during this time. Small, feathered dinosaurs like Archaeopteryx hint at the deep connection between birds and their dinosaur ancestors. Fossils reveal that feathers first evolved not for flight, but likely for insulation and display. Over time, some species adapted these feathers into wings that allowed them to glide or fly short distances, giving rise to the first true birds. In this way, the age of dinosaurs planted the seeds for the flocks of sparrows, eagles, and hummingbirds that fill our skies today. While dinosaurs ruled the land, the seas were dominated by other giant reptiles like ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs. These marine reptiles were not true dinosaurs, but close relatives, adapted to life in the water. They hunted fish, squid, and each other in the warm, shallow seas that covered large parts of the continents. Flying reptiles, known as pterosaurs, soared overhead, their wingspans ranging from the size of a small bird to that of a small airplane. The age of dinosaurs was not static. Climate, sea levels, and plant life shifted over millions of years, driving evolutionary change. Dinosaurs adapted to new environments and survived smaller extinction events that periodically reshaped ecosystems. They were remarkably diverse, living in polar forests where darkness lasted for months, desert regions with scorching days and freezing nights, and coastal plains teeming with life. By the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago, dinosaurs had spread across every continent, from what would become North America to the forests of Antarctica. Some species were as small as chickens, others dwarfed anything that walks the earth today. They nested in colonies, migrated in herds, and exhibited complex social behaviors that paleontologists are still uncovering. Fossilized nests and fossilized tracks reveal details of parenting, migration, and even possible pack hunting. But even the reign of these magnificent animals was not immune to the unpredictable forces of Earth's history. An enormous asteroid impact and massive volcanic eruptions would combine to end the age of dinosaurs abruptly. Yet their legacy lives on. Every bird that flies is a living link to the dinosaurs' age of dominance, a reminder that this remarkable lineage never fully vanished. The world the dinosaurs built was one of thriving ecosystems balanced between predators and prey, plants and pollinators, ocean hunters, and flying reptiles. For more than 160 million years, they shaped and were shaped by the shifting continents, changing climates, and ever-present forces of evolution. Their bones, preserved in rocks around the world, tell us that life is capable of filling every niche, pushing every limit, and surviving on scales of time almost too vast for us to comprehend. Long after they vanished, the image of these ancient giants still captures our imagination, reminding us how dramatically life can rise, thrive, and adapt when Earth's conditions allow it. The age of dinosaurs remains one of the greatest stories our planet has ever written, a story still being pieced together bone by bone and fossil by fossil as we seek to understand the creatures that once ruled the Earth. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs dominated Earth's landscapes. They adapted to changing climates, migrated across shifting continents, and filled every possible niche, from massive, long-necked herbivores grazing in forest canopies to nimble predators stalking prey in coastal swamps. But no matter how perfectly life evolves to fit its world, nature sometimes delivers blows so sudden and devastating that even the strongest cannot adapt fast enough. Around 66 million years ago, the age of dinosaurs came to an abrupt and violent end. An ending brought on by a single cosmic visitor from space. The first hints of this catastrophic event came not from dinosaur bones, but from the rocks that bury them. In the 1980s, scientists discovered a thin, dark layer of clay in rock formations around the world, marking the boundary between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods. This boundary layer contained unusually high levels of iridium, a rare element on Earth's surface but common in meteorites and asteroids. Suspicion grew that an asteroid impact might have played a role in the mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs and countless other species in a geological heartbeat. Further clues came from shocked quartz grains, microscopic structures in minerals formed under intense pressure, the kind of pressure unleashed by nuclear explosions, or, on a far larger scale, a massive asteroid strike. These grains, along with tiny glass beads called tektites, formed from molten rock blasted into the atmosphere, pointed to an impact so powerful it reshaped the entire planet. The final piece of the puzzle was found hidden beneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There, buried under layers of sediment, lies the Chicxulub crater, a scar more than 180 kilometers wide and about 20 kilometers deep. This colossal impact crater matched the timeline perfectly. Scientists calculated that the asteroid responsible was likely around 10 to 12 kilometers wide, traveling at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour when it slammed into Earth. The day the asteroid struck, life on Earth faced an apocalypse. As the massive rock tore through the atmosphere, the friction superheated the air around it, creating a searing fireball brighter than the sun. When it hit the shallow seas near what is now Chicxulub, the impact released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs exploding at once. In an instant, the crust buckled and melted, blasting trillions of tons of rock, dust, and vaporized seawater high into the atmosphere. The immediate effects were cataclysmic. A mega earthquake would have shaken the entire planet, while massive tsunamis swept across ancient coastlines, drowning forests and lowlands far from the impact site. Fires ignited by the heat of re-entering debris raged across continents, torching vegetation and filling the sky with smoke and soot. Creatures within hundreds of kilometers of ground zero were obliterated instantly. For those further away, the devastation came with terrifying speed. But it was the aftermath that made the extinction so total. Dust and aerosols thrown into the stratosphere blocked out sunlight for months or even years. Global temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis in plants and plankton all but stopped, starving ecosystems from the bottom up. Without plants, herbivores died off. Without prey, predators followed. In the oceans, plankton and other microscopic organisms collapsed, breaking the marine food chain. Acid rain, formed from chemicals released by the vaporized rock, fell across the globe, poisoning lakes and soils. The fossil record reveals the brutal results. An estimated 75% of all species vanished in the aftermath of the impact. Whole groups of animals disappeared. Ammonites, the once plentiful shelled creatures that drifted through the seas, went extinct. Pterosaurs, the great flying reptiles, vanished completely. Marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs disappeared along with many species of fish and marine invertebrates. On land, Dinosaurs that had ruled for so long were wiped out, leaving only their small, feathered relatives, birds, to carry on their legacy. Yet the asteroid was not the sole cause of destruction. Earth itself was in upheaval. Around the same time, immense volcanic eruptions were underway in what is now India, forming the Deccan Traps, one of the largest volcanic provinces in the world. These eruptions released massive amounts of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, contributing to acid rain, global cooling, and climate chaos. Whether the volcanoes worsened the effects of the impact or simply piled on more misery is still debated, but together, they ensured that life faced a crisis from which few species could escape. Some creatures, however, did survive. Small mammals, burrowing reptiles, amphibians, and certain birds managed to find refuge in the harsh, dark years that followed. Their small sizes, flexible diets, and ability to shelter underground or in water gave them a better chance than the giant reptiles that had towered over them for so long. In the aftermath of the disaster, these survivors emerged into a world transformed. Once the dust settled and sunlight returned, Earth's ecosystems slowly rebuilt themselves. Ferns and hardy plants were among the first to recolonize the charred, barren landscapes. Fossils from this time often show what paleontologists call a fern spike, an abundance of fern spores in the layers just above the extinction boundary, evidence of how these simple plants thrived in the cleared land before forests and more complex ecosystems could re-establish themselves. With the great reptiles gone, new opportunities opened for the small mammals that had once scurried in the shadows of dinosaurs. Over millions of years, these creatures diversified into new shapes and sizes, taking advantage of the vacant ecological niches left behind. From these small, resilient ancestors, mammals would evolve into bats, whales, horses, elephants, and eventually humans. The asteroid impact that ended the reign of the dinosaurs remains one of Earth's best-known examples of how sudden, unpredictable forces can redirect the path of life. It was not the first mass extinction Earth experienced, nor would it be the last, but it was one of the most dramatic. It reminds us that while evolution builds the resilience and adaptability of species, sometimes survival comes down to luck, being small enough, adaptable enough, or simply in the right place at the right time. Even today, the crater hidden beneath the Yucatan Peninsula is a silent witness to this turning point. The layers of rock around the world that contain iridium and shocked quartz stand as a global marker of that terrible day when an asteroid reshaped the planet's future. Fossils preserved in those layers, from the last dinosaur bones to the first signs of new flourishing mammal species, tell a story of life's fragility and its remarkable ability to bounce back. Though the age of dinosaurs ended in fire and darkness, their story did not vanish entirely. Every bird that sings today is a living remnant of that ancient lineage. And the lessons of that impact remain clear. Earth's history is not a steady, predictable climb, but a story punctuated by catastrophe and renewal. Reminders that our planet is never truly still. In the void left behind, life always finds a way to begin again, adapt and thrive in forms no asteroid could ever fully erase. When the dust settled after the asteroid impact that ended the age of the dinosaurs, Earth was a changed world. The great reptiles that had once thundered across plains and forests were gone, leaving behind empty spaces in ecosystems that had taken millions of years to build. Into this quiet and shattered landscape, the survivors crept out from burrows, tree hollows, and muddy banks. Among them were the small, warm-blooded mammals that had lived in the shadows for so long. Mammals had existed alongside dinosaurs for over 100 million years, but they had remained mostly small and inconspicuous. Many were tiny insect eaters, nocturnal and adapted to a life of hiding. These traits, which once seemed limiting, proved to be a saving grace during the darkness and scarcity that followed the asteroid impact. Being small meant needing less food. Burrowing underground offered protection from firestorms and freezing temperatures, and a varied diet helped them survive in a world where food chains had been broken apart. With the dinosaurs gone, new opportunities opened up in every corner of the land, air, and sea. Mammals began to diversify rapidly. Some remained small, like shrews and rodents, which found success in nearly every habitat. Others grew larger, experimenting with new ways of life that no longer had to compete with enormous reptiles. Fossils show how quickly mammals evolved into new forms. Some species adapted to life in trees, becoming the first primates, ancestors to monkeys, apes, and eventually humans. Others returned to the water, where whales and dolphins would evolve from four-legged land-dwelling creatures into the ocean giants we know today. Some mammals grew into powerful predators, filling roles once held by the likes of raptors and small theropod dinosaurs. Big cats, wolves, and bears would one day rule forests and plains in much the same way the dinosaurs once had. One of the great strengths of mammals was their adaptability. Being warm-blooded meant they could stay active in cold climates and hunt at night. Having live births and nurturing their young gave them a better chance to survive in unstable conditions. Over tens of millions of years, these advantages allowed them to spread to every continent and thrive in environments ranging from frozen tundra to steaming jungles. The rise of mammals reshaped ecosystems just as powerfully as the dinosaurs once did. They helped spread seeds, shape forests, and create new relationships between predator and prey. From tiny bats flitting through the night sky to massive elephants roaming the grasslands, mammals expanded into every niche they could find. In the void left by the Great Extinction, they proved that even the smallest survivors can change the world when given the chance. Long after mammals rose to fill the world left behind by the dinosaurs, Earth's climate took on a new rhythm of extremes. For the past 2.5 million years, the planet has cycled through repeated ice ages, long, frigid periods when massive glaciers crept down from the poles, covering vast regions of North America, Europe, and Asia in thick sheets of ice. In between these frozen stretches came warmer intervals, called interglacials, when the ice retreated and forests and grasslands returned. This shifting climate shaped the evolution of remarkable creatures. The megafauna, giant mammals that adapted to survive in cold, harsh landscapes. Among them were the iconic woolly mammoths, with shaggy coats, curved tusks, and thick layers of fat to withstand sub-zero temperatures. These massive animals traveled in herds across steppe-like plains, grazing on grasses and using their tusks to sweep away snow in search of buried food. Alongside the mammoths lived other giants of the Ice Age world. Mastodons, relatives of modern elephants, roamed forests of spruce and fir, browsing on branches and leaves. Enormous ground sloths lumbered through South and North America, some species standing as tall as a small house when they reared up on their hind legs to strip foliage from trees. Saber-toothed cats hunted large herbivores with their iconic elongated fangs, lying in wait to ambush prey on open plains. Early humans shared the landscape with these animals, learning to track, hunt, and use their meat, bones, and hides for food, shelter, and tools. Cave paintings in places like Lascaux and Chauvet in France still show vivid images of mammoths, bison, and other Ice Age animals, reminders of how important they were to the survival and imagination of our ancestors. As the most recent Ice Age ended about 12,000 years ago, the climate warmed rapidly. Glaciers retreated, sea levels rose, and the wide-open steppe grasslands shrank. Many megafauna species could not adapt quickly enough to these changing conditions and the pressures of human hunting. Mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths disappeared, leaving only smaller, more adaptable animals to carry on. The legacy of these ice ages remains etched into Earth's landscapes. Deep valleys, glacial lakes, and rich, fertile soils left behind by grinding ice sheets still shape where people farm and live today. And the bones of the giant beasts that once ruled these icy realms lie buried in permafrost and peat bogs, frozen in time as a testament to an age when colossal mammals walked side by side with the first humans, enduring the last great frozen chapter in Earth's long story of change. Among all the creatures that emerged after the ice ages, one would come to shape Earth's landscapes and future more profoundly than any before. Humans did not appear overnight, but through a long line of hominins, early human-like ancestors who gradually evolved traits that made them stand apart. The story of humankind began in Africa, where the first upright walkers took their tentative steps across savanna grasslands more than 4 million years ago. Walking on 2 legs freed early hominins' hands for new tasks. They could carry food and tools, see over tall grasses, and travel long distances more efficiently. Over time, these early humans developed larger brains, complex social structures, and the ability to make and use tools. Stones were chipped into sharp edges to cut meat, scrape hides, and shape wooden spears. Fire, once a force to fear, became something to control, providing warmth, light, and protection from predators. Homo sapiens, our own species, emerged around 300,000 years ago. For tens of thousands of years, they lived alongside other human relatives like Neanderthals and Denisovans, sometimes competing with them and sometimes interbreeding. Fossils, artifacts, and ancient DNA reveal how these early humans spread from Africa into Europe, Asia, and eventually the far corners of the globe, adapting to deserts, rainforests, icy tundra, and island shores. With each migration, humans learned new ways to shape their surroundings. They hunted mammoths on frozen plains, gathered plants and nuts in dense forests, and fished in rivers and coastal waters. They made clothing from hides, built shelters from wood and bone, and painted images on cave walls that still captivate us today. The development of language, art, and symbolic thought marked a turning point unlike any before. Humans could pass down knowledge across generations, plan hunts, and share stories around campfires. Communities formed, bonded by shared myths and the beginnings of spiritual beliefs that tried to explain the sun, the stars, birth, and death. About 12,000 years ago, the last ice sheets receded, and many human groups began to shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled farming. They planted seeds, domesticated animals, and built villages that would grow into the first cities and civilizations. With agriculture came surplus food, larger populations, and new technologies that would forever change how humans lived on the land. From humble beginnings on the African plains to the builders of ancient temples and the keepers of knowledge carved in stone, the dawn of humankind is a story of adaptability, curiosity, and the power to shape the environment. It is the bridge between Earth's wild past and the complex societies that would soon leave their mark on every corner of the world. From a swirling cloud of gas and dust to molten rock, vast oceans, wandering ice sheets, and forests filled with towering beasts, Earth's story has always been one of change. Life adapted again and again, surviving fire and ice, poisoned skies, and cosmic collisions. In this long history, humans are only a recent arrival. Yet in a few short millennia, our species has become the greatest force of transformation the planet has ever known. With the rise of agriculture and cities, humans learned to bend nature to their will. Forests were cleared, rivers dammed, and grasslands turned into fields of wheat and rice. Trade routes and empires connected continents, moving plants, animals, and ideas to every corner of the globe. Coal and oil lifted civilizations into an industrial age, driving invention but also filling the air and seas with pollution. The same fossil fuels that powered our cities and cars trace back to ancient plants and swamps buried millions of years ago. A reminder that even today, we live off the energy of Earth's distant past. In the last century, human influence has become visible from space. Sprawling cities, highways cutting through rainforests, massive reservoirs, and farmland where once wild plains ran free. We have become expert at unlocking the planet's resources, but that power comes with a cost. Rising carbon dioxide levels from burning fossil fuels now warm the atmosphere at a rate that echoes the sudden climate shifts of Earth's deep history. Ice caps shrink, seas rise, and weather grows more extreme. Signs that Earth's living systems are being pushed far from the balance they once knew. Yet Earth's story shows that change is not always an ending. Life has always found ways to recover, adapt, and fill the spaces left behind. The difference today is that we know what is happening. We understand the fragile balance that keeps oceans alive, forests growing, and the air breathable. Unlike the cyanobacteria that once transformed the atmosphere by accident, humans can choose what kind of mark they leave behind. Every action today becomes part of the next chapter in this 4.5 billion year story. New technologies offer hope, cleaner energy, restored wetlands, and protections for species pushed to the brink. Communities and cultures around the world are finding ways to live more lightly on the land, guided by lessons learned from the past. The same curiosity that once led our ancestors to paint mammoths on cave walls or look up at the stars now drives us to study Earth's climate, its living systems, and how to protect them. From ancient stardust to a living, breathing world, Earth remains a place of wonder, a reminder that even the smallest spark can shape the future. The story that began in fire and oceans is still being written, and we are its latest authors, holding the power to choose what happens next.